Hi there, my name's Eve Stevens, editor of Movement.net, and I'm here at Move America 2025, and I am joined by Jean Berdichevsky, co-founder and CEO of Sila Nanotechnologies. So just to start us off, how has your Move America experience been so far?
Yeah, great. It's a very nice conference, bringing together a lot of different folks, OEMs, suppliers, everything around mobility. So far, so good.
Well, that's what we like to hear. So Move is all about kind of uniting agents from across the mobility spectrum. What do you see as the value of these kinds of cross-industry events? Why have you chosen to speak at Move?
Yeah, it's an opportunity to reach a good audience, especially here in Detroit with all the OEMs here, as well as a lot of the supply base. But it's, as we think about the automotive industry, we need to think about how electrification and how autonomy both intersect with what's happening, as well as just the nature of kind of still continuing with the legacy technologies. So batteries have a lot of interplay with obviously the vehicles that are getting designed, but also with autonomy where you need more long range battery technology, more sort of long durability where vehicles might be doing 1 million miles, and you're able to kind of talk to both types of folks here.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different people in the room, and definitely just walking through, there's been some really interesting conversations at play. So you spoke in a talk called "Unpicking the Global Battery Supply Chain." What do you kind of see as maybe the biggest vulnerabilities to battery materials supply chain, and how is Sila kind of mitigating these?
It's really all of the upstream supply for batteries is a vulnerability for the U.S., for North America, and for Europe. So in the U.S., we have the IRA that was passed a few years ago, and that drove a lot of battery cell investment. So we have a lot of gigafactories that are producing cells. But if you look at where all the raw materials and all the critical minerals, all of the converted materials, anodes, cathodes, separators, electrolytes are coming from, they're all still coming from Asia. And so we need to change that. Now, different materials have a different level of concentration. For example, graphite is over 90% comes out of China, either processed, mined, refined in China. And so that concentration is higher than the concentration of rare earth metals in China today. So that's what Sila addresses. Our silicon anode technology replaces graphite in a lithium-ion battery and is produced in Washington State. And just earlier this week, we announced opening the start of operations at our automotive scale production facility there in Washington. So we're starting to mitigate that challenge, but it'll take a few years of building up capacity in the US and North America, and then later on in Europe to really mitigate these supply chain challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And following on from that, let's talk a little bit more about Sila Nanotechnologies. How do you feel that you guys sort of differentiate yourselves from other people in the industry, kind of trying to do similar things?
Yeah, most new technologies, or rather, most people in the industry are still just trying to catch up to existing technology. So there's U.S. producers of graphite, U.S. producers of conventional cathode materials. One of the things that Sila's done is we've leapfrogged ahead to the next generation of technology. So silicon anodes are what will replace graphite anodes over the next decade or two. And so we're working we were starting with a breakthrough piece of technology, and then we're scaling that up rather than trying to play catch up to Asia. Now, within new technologies, there's different approaches. Folks that are doing solid state, folks that are doing silicon, those are really the primary two pieces of tech today. And the difference is with silicon, you're able to use existing battery factories. You're able to integrate that technology into gigafactories that are already built. And as we talked about earlier, those factories are already online in the US. There's hundreds of gigawatt hours of capacity. And so we really should be upgrading that capacity. Whereas with solid state technology, you're going to have to rebuild all of those factories, and that'll require tens of billions of dollars of investment that nobody really wants to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can kind of repurpose these things, it makes so much more sense also from a sort of sustainability perspective. So definitely. You've had a very sort of illustrious career. You were the seventh employee at Tesla, and you've since gone on to co-found your own company. How do you think your sort of technical experience at Tesla has helped you as you now move into this sort of industry-leading management position?
So I think the ethos in the early days and still today at Tesla was to be radically self-reliant, where you're manufacturing, you're making everything that's needed for whatever new thing you're doing. You're not relying on the outside world. When you're making a new technology, when you're trying to bring a new technology into the world, you have to start that way. Once it starts to work, you can rely on a supply base. You can develop suppliers to take some of that investment and move it off your own balance sheet. But that radical self-reliance that I learned in the early days is something we've applied at Sila and throughout to be able to make these new technologies where, if you're trying to do something new, there's probably not someone else in the world that's really going to help you all that much.
Absolutely. So when it comes to EVs, what would you say is sort of exciting you the most in the industry? Is there any kind of new technology that you've identified as a real standout?
So I think, silicon anodes will make a big difference. But aside from what we do on silicon anodes, really the the OEMs are starting to bring these new platforms online, the next generation of platforms. I would say from traditional OEMs, outside of Tesla, most of the vehicles haven't been very compelling. And that's really because the platforms were sort of designed to be both gas compatible and EV compatible, and it's sort of neither fish nor fowl. And so the new vehicle platforms, whether it's BMW's Neue Class or Mercedes MMA or the great work that GM has done, we'll see what Ford launches as well. That'll be really interesting. These new platforms are just fundamentally better. They're designed from the ground up to be EVs, and I think they're going to give consumers a more compelling product. That paired with new battery technology, I think that's the way we start to see growth in EVs again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like a really exciting time to be in the industry at the moment. There's a lot of big changes. And obviously with EV, there has been a dip, but it seems like things are massively changing here in the US and there's some really interesting stuff going on. So just before we wrap up, just a kind of final question. So Sila started out as a startup and it's since gone on to become a $1 billion company. So kind of what advice would you give to startups in the industry? What would be maybe some kernels of wisdom that you could pass on?
Yeah, look, we're still a startup. We're still private. We're still building out the capacity we need to be a large and sustainable business, and there's a lot more to go from here. But look, I think the biggest thing is you have to have a lot of patience and persistence for this industry, and so you have to plan for things will take longer than you might expect, and you have to make sure you have plans in place that allow you to survive through the downturn. So, we started the company kind of right as the kind of clean tech 1.0 bubble was bursting, and it was very tough to raise money. Then there was kind of a run up for some number of years, and now we're sort of in another lull again, but it'll come back up. And so the key, if you really want to make an impact in the world and make a difference, is you have to survive through the downturns, and you have to be very, very resilient for that. So you kind of have to just plan for things, plan for unexpected downturns, and be ready to kind of to hunker down and get through that in waiting for kind of the next cycle to come up.
Yeah, absolutely. Playing the long game, persevering. Absolutely, that's where it's at. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today, Gene. I really hope you've enjoyed the conference, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.